Previously on Avatar.
I am cautiously optimistic about this show. In fact, I think that, at the least, Netflix's Avatar: The Last Airbender will be pretty good, you know? 7 out of 10 minimum. Okay. Let's just talk about it, alright? We gotta talk about it. This is going to be a more relaxed video than most. The show only came out a couple of days ago, and I kind of just want to release all my initial thoughts before I actually start diving into the reviews and have them sort of change and morph my opinion. So let's just begin with some backstory. I'm a huge fan of Avatar: The Last Airbender. The original show means a lot to me, and I detailed all of this in my previous video where I spoke about my cautious optimism for this new Netflix live-action adaptation. Don't get me wrong, my expectations weren't sky high or anything, but I thought it would be decent, you know? Then on the 22nd of February, the day the show dropped, the reviews started to pour in. Now, I knew I wasn't watching it until the 23rd because I'd made plans with a good friend to binge the whole thing in one go. But let's just say that once I started reading what people were saying about this show, the acting, the dialogue, the effects, the writing, my expectations basically hit the floor. Which is fine, you know, it really isn't the end of the world. The original show is always going to be there. But still, I obviously would have preferred for this adaptation to get good reviews. So yeah. Basically, going into this thing, the expectations couldn't have been lower. And I think this is why the first 2 episodes actually impressed me quite a bit. The whole time watching them, I was just thinking, I don't know man, this is pretty good. I mean, you know, it's not Breaking Bad, of course not, but it's a lot better than what everyone was saying online. Then, over the course of the next 6 episodes, I started to think, okay, I sort of get where people are coming from. Don't get me wrong, Netflix's Avatar: The Last Airbender is not like some 1-star show. I can't really understand people who just straight up think this is terrible, but I definitely understand where most people's grievances are coming from. So what we're gonna do is basically just discuss each aspect of this show, what I liked, what I didn't like, before wrapping it up with some of my overall thoughts on the future of this franchise. So first of all, I just want to say that I basically stand by my opinion from the previous video that every single character was cast really well. I saw quite a lot of complaints about the acting, especially directed towards Aang and Katara, but honestly, none of the performances bothered me at all, and any of the problems I have with the characters come from the writing and directing, not the acting. I think pretty much all of the actors here, many of whom are literal children, remember, are doing a fine job. If I had to pick one standout performance, it would probably have to be Ian Ousley, who plays Sokka. I just thought he was really charismatic and basically stole any scene he was in. But I also really liked Dallas Liu as Zuko, Paul Sung-hyun Lee as Iroh, and Maria Zhang as Suki was also nice to watch. And I also thought the show looked pretty good. I saw so many people online just trashing the special effects and costumes, so again, maybe my expectations were just really low. But I don't know man, I was pretty impressed by most of the visuals. I think other than when characters are riding on Appa, where it's pretty obviously green screen, or whenever Aang goes into the Avatar state, which does look kinda dodgy, the effects were absolutely fine. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm already getting sick of this new Mandalorian LED virtual set thing. I wish we could just go back to the days where we at least tried to film everything on location, but it's just not the world we live in, unfortunately. But yeah, the effects were not an issue for me, and I actually thought certain scenes looked pretty impressive. The one that immediately comes to mind is the whole Koizilla fight in the final episode. Genuinely looked so real, especially for a TV show. Remember, this does not have the same budget as a film. They're just different mediums and require different levels of expectation. The other thing lots of people have talked about is how clean everyone's clothes look. Some have even compared the costumes to like, you know, what a cosplayer would wear, and again, I understand where people are coming from, but let's just say it's not something I really noticed. I was fine with the costumes, especially the Kyoshi warriors who looked incredible. And lastly, before I get into the negatives, I thought the fighting choreography was really strong as well. I don't think necessarily that the bending scenes were directed really well or anything, but overall I was happy with how the fights looked. Yes, all the waterbending did look a bit strange, it is obviously the most difficult bending element to make realistic, but yeah. Let's now get into the reason why this show was not great. It's the thing which matters the most by a country mile, it's the thing I was most worried about because it's not something the trailers could really show, and it's the thing which matters more than all the other stuff I've talked about combined. I am of course talking about the writing. and the directing, but mainly the writing. The writing is not good, and it creates this really weird feeling while watching it, because the show looks like Avatar, it sounds like Avatar, and at times it kind of feels like Avatar, especially during those first 2 episodes. But the backbone of the entire project, the thing you build everything else on top on, the foundations for the entire show, the writing, is just weak and kind of lazy. You know, maybe I was too harsh on Michael Dante DiMartino and Bryan Konietzko in my previous video. Perhaps this show was doomed the second they left, because, look, the people who wrote this show clearly love the original. They included stuff like the Secret Tunnel song, and the Mike Cabbages guy, and more stuff about Luten, and it all felt great while watching it. But it almost felt like they were just trying to throw nostalgia at us while completely misunderstanding what actually made the original show such a masterpiece. Because look, I'm absolutely fine with changes. In fact, some of the changes were brilliant. The whole thing about Zuko saving the 41st Battalion or whatever was really good. I guarantee you when Michael Dante DiMartino and Bryan Konietzko heard that, they thought, damn, we should have done that. I mean, maybe it was their idea, we probably won't ever know though. But anyway, some of the changes were great, but also a lot of them just kind of felt like the writers going, well, we need to justify this adaptation, so we're gonna have to change some things. And then just picked at random what they were going to change about the original show and what they were going to keep. I also think a huge reason why this adaptation feels so off, and it's something I mentioned in my previous video, is the whole thing about going from 20 episodes, which are each around 23 minutes and are very much episodic in nature, to 8 episodes which are an hour long each. Yes, I am very much aware that they equal to about the same amount of time, but the pace of a cartoon can get away with being so much quicker than the pace of something in live action. And this show, which Netflix has done, it just felt so rushed. It felt like they were speedrunning through everything. If their heart was set on the hour-long serialized episode thing, which I'm really not sure should have even been the way, but if they knew that's what they wanted, then they should have done more than 8 episodes. Honestly, they should have done like 13 or 14. It's the only way to tell the story properly in that format. I do think at the end of the day, the story of Avatar: The Last Airbender does work best in 20-minute Adventure of the Week stories, and that is something you can only really do in an animated format. So perhaps this show was doomed from the start, I don't know. I guess the other huge thing is that, look, the original show is incredible for so many reasons, but for me the single best thing about Avatar is the characters and their arcs. It's one of the main reasons I don't really like The Legend of Korra, and it's one of the main problems with this live-action adaptation, because there are no character arcs. There is no character development. Take Sokka, for example. Again, probably my favourite character in this show, and one of my favourites in the original. But the Sokka we get in this show is basically Sozin's Comet Sokka. He is already a brilliant leader, he is already not a misogynist, he doesn't really have any flaws. In fact, none of the characters really do, except for Zuko and maybe Zhao. In terms of Aang and Katara, again, they don't need to be the exact same as their animated counterparts, but they basically took away these two characters' most integral personality traits and replaced them with... oh yeah, nothing. Aang is just not fun to watch at all, really. Which is a shame because the kid who plays him is clearly a really joyful and funny guy. But in this show we basically only get the sad and serious Aang because that's what the plot needs, and there isn't enough time to just see these characters breathe and hang out and talk to each other. Which is, again, something the original did so well. This is the same for Katara. In the original, she is such a great character. She's incredibly hopeful and inspiring, but also has this temper and mean streak. And yeah, it's not present in this show. Katara is basically just whittled down to being sad and traumatized about her mum. Also, speaking of Aang and Katara, neither of them learn to waterbend in this season. Like, sure, there's some small bits where Katara is practicing, but in the original show, there is a literal time jump between when they arrive at the Northern Water Tribe and when the Fire Nation invades, where these two characters basically learn waterbending. But here, there is no time jump. And I know some people don't really care about this stuff. They're the same people who defend Rey in the sequel trilogy becoming really powerful with no training, but in the original Avatar, hard work and discipline are important. Characters' abilities need to be somewhat earned for there to be stakes, for us to feel invested in what's happening. But yeah, there's none of that here. Also, the dialogue. It's not it. It's just not it. There is so much exposition in this show, and it's like the first rule of writing, man. I guess what annoys me is that clearly so much work, detail, love, and attention went into basically everything else other than the writing here. And look, you can not like how this show looks, that's fair enough, but unfortunately it all just now seems completely in vain. Here's the thing. It's not a terrible show. It's just kind of forgettable, which is why I can't really think of anything else to say about it. I don't know if they're going to make a season 2, but if they do, they're really going to have to change how this show is written at quite a fundamental level. Also, why was Azula in this? Like, why were Mei and Ty Lee in this? Don't get me wrong, they're good in the scenes they're in, but they didn't do anything. Like, what was that reveal with Azula and Zhao? I can't even remember what happened, but it was just executed so poorly. It's the same with the episode where we get Jet, who I thought was really good actually, and Abed from Community, and Boomy, all in the same thing, and I understand what they're trying to do. I get they have to condense some of the episodes from the original, but it felt like a first draft. It was so messy, and yeah, I think that's gonna be it. This show is not as good as I thought it was gonna be when I first saw the trailers. Looking back on my previous video is gonna be pretty funny now, but it also wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be after I read all those 1-star reviews. It's just another mid show. It's content. You know, it's content. It was clearly made with some love, but the writing just wasn't up to scratch, unfortunately. We still have Avatar Studios. I believe we're getting a film about an adult Team Avatar next year. Now, if that's bad, I will be upset. But of course, we are also always gonna have the original Avatar: The Last Airbender, so whatever happens, it's really not the end of the world. Anyway, that's gonna be it. This was a very relaxed and chill video, wasn't it? I should be coming out with a Denis Villeneuve worst to best in the next few weeks, so look forward to that. I am of course excited for Dune 2, which is coming out next week. But yeah, that's about it. I'll see you in the next one.